Yes, I'll just begin. Yes, Shurukya. Okay, first I will extend my thanks to St. Xavier's College and the concerned departments of Stockholm University, Ramakrishna Vidyamandir, KSAS, Bhaktivedanta Research Center for inviting me to speak in this August gathering. And on that note, I would also like to thank Shrupriya, who is helping me with the projection of my PowerPoint. Shrupriya, can we have the second slide, please? Yeah. Well, as in the sixth day of this FDP, people who are here are already aware that Bengal studies is a broadly inclusive term which has got a recorded history of 1400 years. And a very important component of those 1400 years is definitely the cultural heritage. And in that cultural heritage, another important aspect is the history of Bengali literature, a very, very rich tradition of Bengali literature, which began way back in the 8th century with the Chorjapad and has been moving on till the present day. Standard history of Bengali literature is broadly divided into four parts, that is the ancient, the medieval, the early modern, and of course the modern phases, each having a few hundreds of years with some unidentified dark phases which are called the Andhukar Yug at the intersectional point of any two phases. Now, in such long and diverse history of Bengali literature, one very important part has not been given its deserving recognition and has not even met the integral part of the history of Bengali literature, except for a couple of mentions like Fort William College and Lalberi Day's Folk Tales of Bengal and William Carey's Kathopokathon and 1760 onwards in the dark phase after Bharat Chandra's day, some oratures or some folk elements that cropped up that point of time. So what I am trying to say is that the folk literature and the folk culture, which is the indigenous unrecorded history of Bengali literature, a very, very important part, that had not been a part of that 1400 recorded history of Bengal, and therefore it made the study of Bengal history incomplete until almost the 1970s. In the 1970s and then in 80s, Dr. Ashutosh Bhattacharya took up the charge of historizing oral literature in his 5 volumes of Bangla Lok Sahitya and then followed by 4 volumes of Lok Sangit Ratnakar. Then later on, we find individual researchers like Dinesh Chandra Sen, we find Binoy Ghosh, Heinz Mode, Arun Kumar Rai and his disciples, and also we find institutions like Calcutta University, who in 1960 has established folklore as a paper in their master's level, and in 1969 Academy of Folklore, an independent research institute who were the first institution outside Calcutta University to incorporate or to begin a certificate course in folklore, and that is how folklore, which was thought to be the Chotoloker Sahitya, became a part of the studies of the urbanized, the sophisticated Bengali literature. Why I am mentioning this is that when we are talking about Bengal studies, we really cannot keep away talking about the very rich cultural heritage of folk literature. And today my emphasis would be on orature, which is the most important part of folk literature, and also not just orature but women and orature. We can go to the next slide, please. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I'm not going into the different genres of folklore because the time constraint is there. We all know that there are about more than a dozen of different types of folk literature prevalent nowadays. But out of those 12, 13, 14 types of folk literature, 6 and 7 are dominated by women, or I would say those are essentially women-centric oratures. Before I go into detailing those women-centric oratures, I would like to draw your attention to the features of orature or oral literature, because those are extremely different from the written literature. As you can see on the slide, these are essentially, of course, oral utterances with no written versions, no written texts. They transcend orally from one generation to another, and most importantly, these kind of oral literature are confined amongst unlettered, I'm not saying uneducated, but unlettered, socially marginal rural people. And any kind of folk literature, be it a orature or anything else, is very important for the fact that we cannot identify a single creator. Any kind of a folk literature is a group creation which reflects combined knowledge and combined creativity. And interesting factor is that folk literature, especially orature, is highly dependent on the memory and the wish of the narrator. A narrator might forget to mention something which he had learned or she has learned from the predecessor, and might also want to change a part of the narration when narrating it to the next generation. So any kind of orature, any kind of oral literature is always variable, and therefore there is no fixed version. You get multiple versions of maybe one particular story. Therefore, while doing a research on orature, the most difficult part that people face is that it becomes difficult to locate the first unadulterated version. You do not know from where it actually began, or who actually wrote this particular, or who actually created this particular form of orature. Now can we come to the next slide, please? Here I have just put in a table the women-centric oratures. You can see there are more than 8 of them, but of course you can understand that in half an hour I'll not be able to touch upon all of them. So I have decided to concentrate my discussion on 4, maximum 5 of the types of women-centric orature. But before I go into discussing orature of women or orature by women, let us first deal with 3 very important questions. Next slide, please. First question: how should one study women-centric orature? Second question: why at the first place are there women-centric orature? And the third is, what is the medium of women-centric orature? Let me begin with answering the first question. There are 2 ways you can read a woman-centric orature. It is, number 1, orature for women. That means orature which depict women, which may or may not be created by women. It may be created by a man also, or by men also. And there is another form of women-centric orature, which is orature by women, which is essentially created by women. Our discussion will actually concentrate on this second type, that is the orature by women which are created by women, because this brings us to the second question, which is the most important questions. That's why I've marked it in red. Why such oratures were created by women? You know, traditionally, women's association with orature is mostly confined with child-pacifying rhymes, Chele Bhulono Chora, marriage songs, bier gan, keeping vows, that is the bratas, for the welfare of the family, or performing rituals by uttering the mantras. But it is not all. Women's connection with orature is something much more, which we are going to address in the second question. As I already said while talking about the features of orature, that oratures are prevalent mostly among the socially marginal people. And in this marginal life, in any kind of society, women can be termed as marginal of marginals, prantikero prantik. Because of this social position, in the name of heritage and tradition and taboo, women are taught both by the family and by the society to adhere to embargoes. Lots of embargoes are actually imposed upon them, and they are conditioned to believe, they are conditioned to hold their feelings. I would like to utter a Bengali saying which says, "Buk phate to mukh phote na." Your heart may break, but still your tongue should remain tied, because that is considered to be the social norm. In any family, a woman of any kind of identity, be a mother, be a daughter, be a wife, a bride, a sister, whatever, every woman has to fight through several obstructions. Some obstructions might not even be visible, and each obstruction gives the woman who is facing it some kind of a pain, some kind of a humiliation, some kind of a distress. I would like all of you to remember that even in 2022, the tagline on the Women's Day, 8th March, was #break the bias. If in 2022 we have to say break the bias for women, then we can easily imagine that women in the households of rural places or the rural houses in the yesteryears undoubtedly had oceans of anguish, pain, trauma, and humiliation bottled inside their hearts, which they could not express in public, even to the male members of the family, because that was not the norm that they are taught to by their mothers or their sisters or their aunts. But this Nirav Bhashya, this silent annotation, psychology says that at some point of time, this pain, this stress, it comes at the brink of exploding. So when any woman faces that phase that, the pain is unbearable, she cannot hold the pain anymore, she just wants to break out and say something, what does she do? She needs to purgate out her inner feelings. This is the time when the Andar Mahal, or the inner quarter of the house, comes into handy, and this is the place where women, suffering women, exchange or share feelings which are pretty similar. Even people from the other house, women from the other house might come to the Andar Mahal and share their feelings, and therefore what emerged out of those exchanges are essentially Meeder Kotha, or story of women. So these oratures, these oral utterances which were created by women, actually became a tool for the purgation, or I might even say catharsis of emotions which were bothering these women. And as we all know, that after any catharsis comes a sense of therapy. Any catharsis serves a therapeutic purpose. So for women, utterance of these, or the oratures, used to serve a therapeutic purpose by helping them to purgate out or go through a catharsis of the bottled up feelings. I'm saying all these things because while we will be discussing about orature of the women, we must keep in mind that these are not just forms of literature, but these are voices, in capital words I've written here also, voices of the unheard, voices of the women over the ages, through which they wanted to be heard, they wanted to be understood, which is a very, very small expectation. I'm sure you'll agree with me. This brings us to the third question. What is the medium of women-centric orature? Women and men do not speak the same way. Women have a definite form of speaking which is very distinct from men. So the medium of the voice of the women which is being uttered in this orature is called a special lingo, or the Meli Bhasha, or the women's language. I would ask Shrupriya to go to the next slide, which will show you some of the features of the Meli Bhasha, or the features of the woman language. As I said, that women are dumped with embargo and lots of social reservations in the form of taboo or samskar, which prompted them, or rather which forced them to use substitutes, like not taking the name of the husband, not taking the names of the elderly male members of the in-law house, not saying sharp at night, instead saying lota, not saying tiger but saying boroshel. And these are all pretty rural, but even in urban societies you will find that when a married woman breaks the conch shell bangle out of the shakha, she will never say shakhata bhenge geche, she will say shakha baron shakhata bede geche. I heard my grandmother saying that when the stock of rice was exhausted in the house, she was never used to say the chalta phuriye geche, she used to say chal baronto. These are the taboos which have been taught to women. So a women lingo, or the Meli Bhasha, contains substitutes for the actual words. Women also use distorted pronunciations. They also use some very special words and exuberant expressions like olo, mago, hakthu, mashikawa, having periods. These are very, very feminine words which are never usually used by men. And most interestingly, women also curse and women also swear. I would say a few of these curses. Amar mathar dibbi, abagir beti, amar matha khao. And when we come to the swearings, that is the galagal, wonderful words, many of the meanings of which we fail to understand. Olope, minshe, khalbhara, hordakra, ere, bitle, all these wonderful, wonderful words are used while criticizing a man, criticizing a male. And this is the typical form of Meli Bhasha, or the typical form of female language, or the women's language, which are used in oratures. Now with that, I would now straight away go to talking about some of the aspects of the orators that I chose to discuss. Maybe we go to the next slide, please. I begin with the folk tales because folk tales happens to be the biggest type of orature and probably one of the most popular type of orature. In folk tales, we find different representations of women. Bad girls, good girls. Shukhu, Dukhu. Shukhu is the bad girl, Dukhu is the good girl. We find similar representation of stepsisters. They're always usually stepsisters. We find stepsisters in Cinderella also. Similarly, we find bad queen and good queen, that is the Shuorani and the Duorani. One can be reminded of Buddhuhutum, one can be reminded of Shadbhai Champa. But one good thing about folk tales that it is always the good which prevails over the evil. So the Shuorani or the Shukus are always punished at the end, and the Dukhus and the Duoranis always are reinstated in a position of respect and in a position of love. But very important is the brave girl, which are marked in red. You know, bravery is not an attribute which is normally connected with a woman traditionally. I remember a story, and I'm sure many of you also remember the story of Patal Kunna Monimala, where this girl, this Monimala, she is the girl who actually rescued her husband from the clutches of evil to bring him back to her own palace in the Patal inside the water. Just as bravery is not connected with women, similarly, intellect, intelligence and knowledge are also not traditionally connected to women, which brings us to the next slide, which will speak about the riddles. The riddles are two types. One is intelligence oriented, the other one is sexually oriented. The intelligence oriented riddles are basically brain games which are played by women in the Andar Mahol, and basically to fool the newly married groom, that is the Jamai Thokano Chora. They would ask the question to the groom, and if the groom fails to answer the question, the groom will be punished. How? By tweaking his nose, or by tweaking his ears, or sometimes even by forcing him to bray like a donkey, or say meh like a lamb. You might say this is just unadulterated, this is just group fun, but there is a psychology behind these kind of rhymes which is important to mention here. You see, the women of the bride's side, they put the Jamai, that is the groom, through the test because they know that the daughter of the house, when she goes to the in-law house, will have to prove her competence on several occasions, and every time if she at all fails, she will be criticized. Not only she, the entire family will be criticized that she has not been taught anything. So while the women are fooling the groom in the Bashor, fooling the groom in the Andar Mahol, they are probably trying to set the scores even in advance. And by doing so, the family members, the female family members of the bride, are as if feeling a kind of respite that they have been able to give justice to the new bride for the impending judgment or the impending situation that she is going to face when she goes to the groom's house for the first time. And what about the sexually oriented riddles? This is adult entertainment, which girls and women are not allowed to speak outside. Even in the 21st century, 2022, women feel little tongue-tied to speak about sex. So women used to use sexually overtured riddles as a form of adult entertainment only inside the Andar Mahol through their oratures. So the riddles used to reflect intelligence of the women and also their resolve to get justice for another woman. Now we come to the next slide, the slide which contains maxims and proverbs. Whenever we are talking about maxims, the first name which comes to our mind is Khona Bochon. As you know, that Khona was a very, very intellectual woman who had immense knowledge about agriculture, and whatever Khona has predicted or whatever Khona has said about agriculture, all had been later on scientifically proved to be true. And Khona became quite a name. She became known as a very knowledgeable woman, a Pandit. Legend says Khona's erudite father-in-law, the Pandit Mihir, was not happy with the daughter-in-law's or the bride of the house's popularity and publicity outside, and therefore he had ordered the women to slit the tongue of Khona. This is also a reality. It's a legend, so we cannot know whether it's true or not, but it might be true because women are supposed to keep tied. Even today, if you speak too much, you will be said, "Apni boddo beshi kotha bole." Women are not allowed to talk too much. So, in a maxim where a woman can show her intellect, her tongue, her face is tied, her speech is cut off, her voice is put to rest. We come to the Proverbs now, which I find very interesting because I have always been till now talking about the sufferings that women had. In the Proverbs, we see two forms. One is the situation of women in a male-dominated society, and in the other, the power struggle between women where there is no man in the Andhra Mahal. I will just briefly mention one of each. In one proverb, it says, Purusher dosh dosha, narir shudhu shwa bosha. That means men can work in 10 avatars and women only relax. I'm sure all of you can relate to what it means. It actually means that there is no acknowledgement of household work, of unpaid labor even today. A woman who works in the house, who does all kind of household chores and is not paid, is supposed to give love's labor to the family. And that social attitude towards women has been expressed in this particular proverb. But then I come to the next one where it shows the power struggle, and I would like to say here that I think patriarchy is gender neutral because it is a face of a power. It is a face of a power point, whether it is being exercised by a man or it is exercised by a woman. I will say a proverb which involves sister-in-laws, that is the brother's wife and the brother's sister. ভালো কথা মনে পড়লো আঁচাতে আঁচাতে ঠাকুরজিকে নিয়ে গেছে নাচাতে নাচাতে. Without translating, I'll just give you a small hint of the story. It is just that the bride of the house, the Bodhi, after the lunch was over, suddenly says, oh, I suddenly got remembered that the sister-in-law, that is the Thakurji, my husband's sister, has been taken away by the crocodile. Can you imagine a woman who has seen her sister-in-law being grabbed away by the crocodile? She comes back home, doesn't say a word, eats and does all kind of household chores, and then suddenly says, oh, I am suddenly reminded. And reminded of what? Bhalo kotha. The death of the sister-in-law is a bhalo kotha. This shows the extent of hatred that remains between relationships between one sister-in-law and the other. And this kind of proverbs can also be seen between the very bitter relationship of, say, a mother-in-law and also a daughter-in-law. Maybe if I find time later on, I will go to that. I'm coming to the rhymes. The next slide, please. There are 3 types of rhymes. General rhyme, Sarbojonin rhyme, I will skip that. Then comes the child pacifying rhymes, which are the Chele Bhulano Chora, and the game rhymes, which are the Khelar Chora. Many of us are familiar with the Khelar Chora because we played these games when we were children. Now, look at the name, Chele Bhulano Chora. See, the name May is not there, as if only the male child needs to be pacified. The female child does not need to be pacified. I'm reminded of a quote by Taslima Nasreen when she said that why can't we have a May Bala? Why must we have a Chele Bala? When we say somebody is naive, we say, oh, khub Chele Manush, but if we say, oh, khub May Manush, the connotation completely changes. So, you can see the preference for the boy child or the khoka, and on this note, I will read out to you rhymes of depicting khoka and rhymes of depicting cookie. In the rhyme that depicts khoka, you all know, but still I will speak out. Khoka jabe মাছ ধরতে ক্ষীর নদীর কূলে, ছিপ নিয়ে গেল কোলা ব্যাং, মাছ নিয়ে গেল চিলে. Khoka had gone to catch fish in the river bank, but the frog has taken away his angle and the fish has been taken away by the hawk. The mother is actually pacifying the khoka and dumping the entire blame on the hawk and the toad because the khoka was a brave boy who could go to angle fish. Then the khoka also goes to marry. Who goes with? Khoka jabe biye korte songe jabe ke barite ache hulo beral, that is the male cat, who will go as the best man. So khoka goes to catch fish, khoka goes to marry. Fine, wonderful. What does the cookie do? Now let's come to 2 rhymes of the cookie. দোল দোল দুলুনি রাঙা মাথায় চিরুনি বর আসবে এক্ষুনি নিয়ে যাবে তক্ষুনি. The mother is rocking the girl child and combing her hair and telling her, I have to get you ready because your groom will come and will take you immediately. We funnily say that in the Hindu society, বরেরা বিয়ে করতে যায়, men go to marry, and মেয়েদের বিয়ে হয়, women get married. So see, a girl child, a cookie, has been conditioned from childhood to wait for the groom to come and pick her up. Another one, কে মেরেছে কে বকেছে কে দিয়েছে গাল, তাই তো খুকু রাগ করেছে ভাত খায়নি কাল. Khoka is glorified because he's gone to catch the fish, but the cookie has been beaten up, or maybe somebody scolded her so much that she's so pained that she did not eat the rice. Nobody picked her up, nobody rocked her, nobody pacified her, and nobody helped her to feed. This is utter discrimination of the khoka and the cuckoo that we find in the rhymes. But this is in a very nascent stage. Now I'm going to narrate to you a game rhyme or a khelar chora which shows a horrific portrayal of how women are seen in games, and I'm very embarrassed to say that even when I was a child myself, I played this game without understanding exactly what I'm doing. Those of whom if you do not know the game, I would like to just give a brief. This game is played between two groups. There could be boys and girls in both the teams. One team represents the king, the Raja, and the other team represents the subject, that the Proja. The team of the Proja asks the team of the Raja, "Hello there, what news has come from the king's side?" The king's side answers, "The king has asked for a girl from your side." Then the Proja side said, or the subject side said, "Which girl does he want?" The king's side points at a girl in the subject side, says, "A balika chailo." The Raja wants this girl, and by the rule of the game, the girl, that particular cookie, is out of the game. I would like to narrate the Bengali version also. Elating belating shoilo, ekti khobor ailo, kishe khobor ailo, Raja ekti balika chailo, kon balika chailo, omuk balika chailo. See, when we used to play these as a children, we never understood the horrific representation of the power of the Raja, who is a representative of the wealthy or the powerful upper class, who unabashedly tortures the commoners in snatching away the women. In the feudal societies, zamindars used to do the same thing. Even in the folk tales, we find ogres doing the same thing, and even in Jivananando's poem 1946-47, we find people who have money, they can take away everything, they can even take away women. How unfortunate that in a simple, apparently innocent games rhyme, this horrible portrayal is being shown for a girl. I come to the last section, which is the lullaby. We know lullaby is basically a sleep-inducing tune sung by the mother to put the child to sleep. But there is much more to it. I will narrate to you one chora, one lullaby, which all of you know. Khoka ghumolo, para jurolo, borgi elo deshe, bulbulite dhan kheyche, khajna debo kishe. Khoka sleeps, the locality becomes quiet, but how do we pay the tax to the Borgis? The birds have taken away all the crops. The mother, in the form of a lullaby, is referring to a terrible historical incident of 1742 when the dacoits from Maharashtra, who were called the Borgis, they created a terrible economic depression in Bengal, and the commoners, the rural people, the people who are BPL, under poverty level, they were completely without money, and they couldn't even buy rice to eat. So while singing or putting the child to sleep, the mother is actually uttering history. Then I will jump to the social component, and I will be speaking about one foreign lullaby which I just can't resist myself from talking. This particular lullaby has come from the Ikoi tribe from Africa, where a young girl who is about 17 or 16 years of old, she got married to a man. The man has deserted her. She had come back. The family didn't take her back. So she had to become a dhaima or a nursing mother to another child. And when she's singing the lullaby to the child, how does the song go? I'm just narrating the English translation to you. My father has killed me, oh. My mother has killed me, oh. Even when I'm still a kid, they have asked me to get married to a husband who is not loving. We know that in Nigeria, in the rural villages, girls who were minors get married forcibly to very, very older men, who after utilizing them, who after consummating the marriages, just let them go. Then the girl is left with nothing but to come back to her own village, to be rejected again by her own parents, and has to take up the role of a feeding mother or a nursing mother to feed herself. See, therefore, lullabies are just not the songs, lullabies are just not the tunes to put a child to sleep. Lullabies actually hold historical components, lullabies actually hold social components, and lullabies also sometimes voice out the pain of the mother, the stress of the mother, the humiliation of the mother, which she is unable to express anywhere, but she feels safe to express it in front of the child because nobody is going to hear her and nobody is going to judge her. Now I'm coming to the last part of my lecture. I hope I just have 5 more minutes to go. What is the need to preserve these oratures, especially by the women? You can see I've mentioned a book called Magic, Science and Religion by Bronislaw Malinowski, who's a very, very famous anthropologist who spent 2 years of his life in a village in Papua New Guinea area in an island called Trobriand Island, where he saw a death of a tribal chief, and it occurred to him that with the death of that chief, whatever knowledge he had in his brain, in his memory, it is going to be perished and lost forever. That means with him an intangible library is going to be perished forever. From that point of time, he realized how important it is to preserve orature, to preserve unrecorded history. And this brings me to a book which all of you know, that is Roots by Alex Haley. You might say this is a recorded history. You might say this is a printed book. Yes, this is a printed book, but how was it created? Alex Haley, a black American author, grew up knowing the story of one Kunta Kinte from Jufure village in Africa, who was their forefather, who was forcibly brought to America as a slave 300 years back. He settled down because he had no other choice with another black woman and formed his own family. And in that family, Kunta Kinte's wife, who was later named as Toby's wife, started a ritual that whenever a new child is born in the family, all the family members will sit around that little child, little newborn baby, and the eldest woman of the family will narrate the story of Kunta Kinte so that the history, the legacy, the roots is never forgotten. Intrigued with this story, Alex Haley goes back to the US archives and actually finds a file in the name of Toby, that is in the name of his forefather, and found the exact story that he has heard from his own grandmother. In a search for his roots, he goes back to Africa, thousands of miles from where he stays, and visits the Jufure village with an interpreter. In the Jufure village, when the interpreter narrates his story to the village chief, the village chief calls for a ritual which is like that. Alex Haley standing in the middle, women of the Jufure village circling him, singing and dancing, holding their children in their arms, giving the children once to Haley and taking back the children. Haley did not understand a word of what they were singing and what was also the implication of giving the child and taking back the child. Later on, the interpreter who was there with him told him that whatever story Alex Haley has narrated to the interpreter, the same story is being narrated in the Jufure language, in the language of the Jufure village by the women. They are also narrating the story of Kunta Kinte, who had been abducted about 300 years back from this very village. So the story that Alex Haley knew from his grandmother, thousands of miles away from Jufure village, is the same story that is being narrated by women in the Jufure village, and by giving their children to Alex and taking them back. This is called a contact magic, by which they are accepting Alex, that is the person belonging to the family of Kunta Kinte. They are accepting the boy from Kunta Kinte's family into their tribe as a kin of them. So Alex Haley becomes a member of the Jufure tribe, the tribe of Kunta Kinte. This completes a full circle, as in USA, women of Kunta Kinte's family preserved the story for 300 years through orature, and miles away in Africa, Jufure village women also preserved the same story for centuries. So see, 2 centuries, 2 languages, 2 cultures and multiple generations thus became unified to create the book called Roots. And this book, therefore, is just not a text. This book is just not a fiction. This is the authentic documentation of the history of the black people in USA. And needless to say that this book could not have been written by Alex Haley if women of both the countries, that is in USA and in Africa, had not preserved through their orature the history for the past 300 years. We come to the last slide. So with that, I wind up my lecture by showing you the importance of women in orature. First, through orature, women actually voice their bottled up emotions, and which shows the true picture of representation of women in the society. And the orators also show the role women play in preservation of unrecorded history, because unrecorded history also is a very, very important history which needs to be corroborated, which needs to be incorporated, and needs to be justified and given the proper recognition in any studies. And honestly, Bengal studies will never be complete unless this acknowledgement is given to orature or folklore studies. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. I cannot hear you, unfortunately. মহিলা ভাষার কালচারাল ইনফ্লুয়েন্স কি? Okay, please narrate the next question also, please. Yes, please narrate the next question also, please. Ma'am, I actually cannot hear you properly. Ma'am, I actually cannot hear you properly. I'm sorry, I just could not hear you properly. I'm sorry, I just could not get you properly, please. I could not get you properly. Yes, could you please repeat the second question? Could you yes. Okay, I would like to answer the second question first. Answer the second question first. Yeah, this is a very good question in the sense that yes, when I'm talking about these orators of the women, they are usually from the Bengali rural families. When you're talking about the Santhal culture, or if you talk about the Santhal societies are more, I would not say progressive, but Santhal societies are more open than the Bengali societies, because you know, in the Santhal societies, men and women almost have the same kind of what I should say, freedom. They have the same kind of power. They have the same kind of privileges. I mean, a Santhal woman can always say, I don't want to stay with you, I will go and stay with someone else. A Bengali woman can't say that. So your question is very right. In case of the Santhal society, definitely their orators will be different from the orators that I have narrated here, because these are all from the patriarchal society, which are very, very much from the Bengali households. But then, of course, you remember that I have also mentioned two proverbs which actually reflect the kind of power, the kind of atrocity that a woman also dumps upon another woman. I did not find much time, otherwise I would have told you one proverb defining the relation between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. that when the mother-in-law dies, the daughter-in-law is not at all sad. She says, "Shashuri molo shokale, kheye de mone thagle kadbo ami bikele." So this again has got nothing to do with patriarchy. This has got to do with the power situation when the daughter-in-law is happy to see the mother-in-law dies, because then now she will become the controller of the Andor Mahal. So yeah, you're right that in case of the Santalis, where the society is much more open, where the society gives much more freedom to the women, of course their orature will not be dictated by this patriarchal approach that we find in the Bengali societies. Very true. Could you please repeat the first question, because there were breaks and I did not really find, could not hear it properly. Unfortunately, I'm extremely sorry, but unfortunately, because of some reason, it is not very audible. Extremely sorry, but I just can't hear your question properly. It is... Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear the second voice. I mean, the first voice, I just could not hear it properly. Oh, what were the cultural influences that shaped the Mehli Bhasha? Okay. Yeah. Yes. First, I will talk about the cultural equalizer. Actually, the Mehli Bhasha, as I said, that it evolved in the Andor Mahal, or the inner quarters of the house. So I think there's extreme indoor life of women where they can talk freely without being judged or without being dumped with some kind of embargo or taboo or anything. Rather, I would say that there is no social lens, there is no patriarchal lens, there is no male lens to judge what they are talking, and that is what possibly helped them to speak out freely. I was talking about the maxims or the riddles or the proverbs with sexual overtures. There is no time, otherwise I would have recited one of them. They're extremely sexually oriented, and you cannot even imagine that the women actually are talking these. Women actually are uttering this kind of words. I think the cultural equalizer is that, or the cultural influence is that, the indoorness of their conversation. The indoorness of their conversation. And the second part of the question is that, okay, I'll give you one example, rather two examples. Like, see, I'm a professor, and we are all of us who are here, we are all Bhadra Mohilas here. I mean, as the society considers us to be all Bhadra Mohilas. In public place, we do not utter bad words because we don't think these are the right things to say. But say when we are among friends, say when we are among our childhood friends, many a times, yeah, we make slips of tongues, we use words which we do not use in public. So there is this kind of a transition which has happened, but that also again inside the quarters of the house. But one thing I must say, I find one big transition, I mean, to other generations. Like my grandmother, for her, my grandfather used to always, she used to always mention my grandfather as taking my father's name, Omuker Baba, Tomuker Dadu, like that. Never ever mentioning the name of the husband, which is a taboo. Now comes the next generation, that is of my mother. My mother still does not call my father by his name, but there is a small improvement. She mentions my father by name when she is talking to someone else. She does not say, given my name, Janamolli Baba. No, she doesn't say Janamolli Baba. Rather, she says my father's name, Omuk said this. So this is another change. Now coming to the current generation, I mean our generation, I have many of my friends, and I'm sure all of you have many of your friends who actually call the husband by name, and also my grandmother used to call apni, my mother used to call tumi, and my friend used to call, actually calls the husband as tui. So this way also, I will not say oration, but I would say the Meli Bhasha, the way women talk, has evolved from being a representative or being substitution word to at least coming out partially of the taboo and then coming to the actuality of equality of calling each other by name. And from apni to tumi to tui, which says a transition, which might say that is a transition from taking the husband as the god, puti devota, to taking the husband as a guardian, then to taking the husband maybe as a partner or as a friend. So I feel this way Meli Bhasha has actually evolved and changed over the years. I feel that way. I have mentioned Patan Konna Mulimala. This is one of my most favorite stories because this is a story which shows how brave a girl can be. You're asking about this positive vibe, yeah. This is the girl who comes out of the patal, who comes out of from her palace underneath the water and rescues her drugged husband from the clutches of the evil and takes him back to lead a normal life. I'm reminded of another story which is the Madho Malonchi Koina. In Madhu Malonchi Koina, Malonchi, that is the it comes from Maman Singha Gitika, actually Maman Singha ballads. So Malonchi is the girl who dresses up as a boy and goes in search of her beloved Madho. And finally, she finds Madhav, brings Madhav back, and they get married. So we get to see this kind of positive, very bright, and very very powerful women also in folk tales. In folk stories, we definitely get to see women with this kind of positive vibes and positive colors. বাজা মহিলাদের সম্পর্কে কি আছে? Baja May, as you said, that the women who cannot give birth to children, they are considered opoya, and in many cases, Baja May is considered to be opoya, and in many cases, in many rituals or in many functions, these women are not allowed to even participate because you are Baja. But I think this is a very one-sided approach, because even now, when a woman cannot give birth to a child, the entire responsibility comes, or the onus, I should say, lies with the woman. Nobody even bothers to know whether the man or the husband is at all capable of, impregnate her. So this kind of a social stigma is always dumped upon the Baja women, even now. And as per the folk tales, I do not have any exact chora or a rhyme right now to tell you, but Baja women in folk tales are considered to be opoya. One story you can go through is the Buddhu Bhutum, where possibly the Durani who did not have children properly, and then she gives birth to two kids. One is a monkey and other is an owl, and therefore she is considered to be extremely opoya because you cannot give birth to a human child. So this kind of an attitude, this kind of approach is actually again speaks not only of the social approach from the patriarchal point of view, but I would say the social approach more from the point of view of the women, because it is the women who actually stop the Baja woman from entering the household for any ritual or for any puja part or something like that. Because men, men, they want an heir, of course they want a male heir, even now people want a male heir, but the Baja term or the treatment that a Baja woman gets usually comes from the women, not from the men. Yes, 19th century education, it has got two parts. On one side, the society used to say that the women who will get educated or who will go outside the house to study in schools will become widows. So that was one side when women were, many families never used to allow their girls to go out to study or to educate. But there were definitely women like Kadamburi and other people who used to go out and who actually studied or who, went and had education. Regarding orature, I would say that since these women learn to write, as I said, that orature is something which does not have a written text. So in the 19th century, when women were getting educated, they were also getting educated to write. So therefore, the structure of orature was getting more or less converted to written texts, to written versions. Maybe they were writing very small things or very short narratives, but they were writing it. And definitely when an educated woman is writing without any embargo, so therefore the portrayal, the reality or the representation would be something which would be positive, or which should be positive, because if she is allowed from the house or if she is allowed from the family to go and study outside, then definitely she will be able to write also. But one unfortunate thing I will mention here, that there was a practice in the 19th century that many women used to write in the alias of a man, because if a woman writes something well, people never used to accept that the woman has written so well. It was always accepted that probably the brother or the husband or the father has written this, and now it is being published in the name of the woman. So there are many women who wrote in the alias of a man. So that dichotomy was also there. Okay. Oh, Shantini, must you ask? Bol. Yeah. সুখু দুঃখ শুকুরের জোরে। Yeah, that's what I said in, Shantini, that's what I said, that buk phate to mukh phote na, that is how women are conditioned. And even now, even in the 21st century, you will see people saying, ekটু মেনে নাও, একটু মানিয়ে নাও, একটু সহ্য করে নাও. Yes, that attitude, that social attitude is still there. But then I personally do not believe shobure meya phole. I sometimes feel that you have to hit it when with the hammer when it is still red. So that is the approach. Whether you accept the older version of shobure meya phole, or whether you want to accept the newer version of strike it when it's still red, it depends on your mentality. But yeah, I do agree with you that women try to adjust, try to be resilient as much as possible, with the hope that maybe I'm suffering so much, so maybe one day God will, give me the gift of good life, give me the gift of good time. So yeah, that kind of thing is also there, that mindset is also there, and that's got nothing to do with the men. That is that has got to do with only the women thinking that way. No man ever sort of forces a woman to think that way, frankly. I mean, সব থেকে বেশি প্রশ্ন